Hey everyone, my name is Thiago, and today I have a very special guest, Aziz from Stella Finance, and we're gonna talk about Stella. I'm excited about Stella for two reasons. First, I'm a user of Stella almost since the beginning, and I say almost because it was introduced by a friend that is not in the Moonbeam community, and he mentioned about Stella, and I said, man, I don't know about Stella, and then I started to learn more about it, and I was really excited and started using in my regular basis in the DeFi operations. And the second reason is because my wife keeps asking me, who is Stella? So I think this video is going to be good to answer both of those questions. All right, Aziz, welcome.
Hey, Tiago, glad to be here. Really excited to share with you and the community about what we are and what we're building. The community is a really strong part of the StellaSwap ecosystem. So we love to hear feedbacks and love to get interactions with users, to further improve our protocol.
That's great, man. That's great. And this is one thing that I've been experienced with a lot of other projects that is deploying Moonbeam and Moonweaver is the connection with the community, right? How
Yes.
this closed feedback loop, like going back and forth and iterating and improving, this has been universal, like a standard, and you guys are doing a great job. It's not for any reason that you guys are in the Harvest Moon campaign really hard with Moonbeam, right?
Yeah, it is. Since launch, we basically launched a few hours, after Moonbeam launch, right? So that makes us one of the first protocols to go live. And we've been working very hard, tirelessly to sort of like create value and create products and services that for the users, for trading, for a lot of use cases. And we've really, spent a lot of time and um, nights to sort of like perfect our protocol and continue to work with amazing stakeholders across the Moonbeam network.
Yeah, that's amazing. Hey, before we start, maybe you can give a quick introduction, like what is StellaSwap in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. So basically, StellaSwap is the leading, largest DEX, decentralized exchange on Moonbeam, right? So Moonbeam is obviously one of the largest parachains on Polkadot ecosystem, and obviously Polkadot is something that that we personally feel is a superior form of Ethereum, right? So that's why we chose to build on Polkadot, and especially so Moonbeam, which is EVM compatible. So StellaSwap is actually a hybrid AMM. So you don't see it very often, right? So a hybrid AMM is basically a combination of a standard AMM, just like Uniswap or SushiSwap, and a stable AMM, just like Curve, right? Which is also live on Moonbeam. So basically, we were a hybrid AMM that allows for liquidity routing or trading across two different AMM models, right? And basically, that is something which is a unique value proposition because usually both of those AMMs are very different by nature. So what we've built is basically a hybrid router to allow for efficient communication or trade routing between those two different AMM models, and that allows us to open up a lot of efficiency in trading, which is the most important thing as a DEX, right? You have to ensure that users gets the best price, lowest slippage, right? So that is something that we've done quite well. But beyond the use case of a DEX just being an efficient protocol for trading, right? We're actually focused on a variety of DeFi use cases, and what we want to be is basically an integrated gateway to DeFi in a very simple way.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely touch base more about this path of becoming a gateway, but you touch a very good point because it was one of the first times that I see the name Stable AMM, right? Because normally Curve is like embedded, it's implicit, that is a stable, but it wasn't very clear to me that there was a big difference between those, right? And other thing that caught my attention is that staked KSMs or staked dots, for example, they're considered stable, right? And
Yes.
so a stable AMM is when two assets is basically paired, right? They're supposed to value the same stuff, the same amount.
Exactly. It's basically a stable AMM is sort of like a misnomer. In fact, the most optimal definition of stable AMM is, or the most optimal term for an AMM that supports stable currencies is basically a correlated assets AMM, right? So basically, an asset which is correlated to each other, which shares the same values. So, for example, if you look at to put it in context in Polkadot ecosystem, right, there are various derivatives of dot. Akela has L dot. We have XC dot. On Moonbeam. So there's a lot of variations of dot, right? So how do we put it as in so highlighting the use case of a stable AMM or correlated asset AMM. And then this is one for the future that we're also trying to build, which is unique, is basically imagine putting all these various permutations or variations of dot into a stable AMM. So you have L dot, XC dot, X dot, whatever synthetic dot, right? And the actual dot. So that allows for efficient trade routing between any of those pairs. Yeah, exactly. So that level, instead of creating, under the standard AMM, you can only have two pairs, right? XC dot and actual dot, and then if you want to support another derivatives of dot, you have to do another farm, so so in total you can have like 4 farms or 5 farms, right? When you can achieve the same efficiency through a single base pool under the stable or non-correlated AMM. So that's one of the main reasons that we launched the correlated asset AMM for trade efficiency.
I see, and very, very interesting. Like the smart contract, all the background is completely different from a stable AMM to a regular one.
Yes, they're fundamentally different, and that's why one of the first things that we sort of like had a tremendous amount of resources on was in sort of like basically solving the question on how can those two AMMs talk or communicate to each other, because each of them have a different as in backend and smart contracts, right? Totally different infrastructure. And because of that, you imagine like each has their own liquidity pool, right? So that is inefficient, right? Because there's two different models with two different pools. So for us to sort of like make this work and to optimize trade efficiency, you have to combine them in so that they can communicate with each other, thereby creating a single pool of liquidity.
I see. It's one smart contract that links to the other smart contracts, or is like the way that you guys wrote both smart contracts, it's a way that they can communicate. Is that it?
Yes. So that's a good question. Now, so for our standard AMM model, we fork Uniswap.
Yep.
For our stable or non-correlated assets, AMM, we fork Saddle Finance, right? And for our hybrid router, we call it, basically our hybrid router is the mechanism that allows the underlying AMM to talk to each other. So we wrote the smart contracts and, have it audited to allow for both of those different AMMs to talk to each other. So that is basically the secret sauce.
I see. Very interesting. And we could definitely go into this route of more technical, but I assume that 90% of the people that is going to watch this it's a little bit less technical. But what is important to know is that you guys used the same basis foundations of Uniswap and other projects, but you upgraded that to be able to communicate between stable AMMs and regular AMMs. And you also
exactly
audited several times, yeah?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Exactly. So audits. We can talk about audits later, but yeah, we as in it is very important in terms of everyone knows, right? The exploits and hacks of the DeFi space. So audits is one of the main priorities for us to even launch anything.
Right. Yeah. Before we jump in, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the background of StellaSwap. When the project started, the team's experience. You already touched some base when you guys started with the beginning of Moonbeam, but the team's experience, who is the team, how many people you have in there?
Got it. Sounds good. So right now we have 12 people, 12 individuals, DeFi degens, team. So basically, most of us, the majority of us, we were actually from one of the first and regulated cryptocurrency exchanges in the Middle East. I was one of the co-founders, founding team member, and actually one of the C suites of the team. And what we spent quite a few years in the regulated exchange, and sort of like grew sort of like tired with it, because yes, centralized exchange business, it is, especially if you're regulated, right, it is a cash cow, right? But in terms of there is a lot of limitations in innovation and launching new stuff, right? Because obviously you're dealing with governments and fiat money in the fiat system. So we decided to, a part of us decided to say, you know what, where innovation happens is in DeFi. So we're going to go to DeFi. Right? And then, we started talking to the Moonbeam team because we were impressed by them. And then, one thing led to another, and then we launched. So most of us came from the traditional centralized exchange background where, we had to create simple products for the masses. I had to sort of like communicate with various governments from around the world, in terms of legislating cryptocurrency laws, and compliance stuff. So that is all that, we know on the back of our hands. So pivoting to DeFi is basically us unleashing our interest, excitement in building new and novel stuff, which you can't really find in the traditional system.
That's cool. It's a very good answer. Yeah, I mean, it's impressive, right? So how long you guys been working in DeFi or in crypto?
So most of us, have been in the crypto space since 2015, 2016.
Since the beginning.
Basically, yeah, since nearing the beginning. So in fact, as in before even co-founding the regulated exchange in the Middle East, right? I actually had a cryptocurrency media as in business, right? We were focused on creating helpful guides for users to sort of like understand blockchain, Bitcoin, and any of the cryptocurrencies. We scaled it up. It was acquired within a year and a half. So we were pretty as a native in the space, and obviously StellaSwap has allowed us to sort of like scale our innovation in terms of creating new products, and synthesizing basically products and services across the space.
That's cool. That's pretty cool. Normally we go like into the project, and talk a little bit more. But I think before we jump in, I would like to ask you a couple of questions that is more like macroeconomics, maybe, and maybe your general vision, because as an investor or as someone that is a hodler, that we want to do smart decisions and we have all the DeFi products available. Sometimes it's really hard to create a strategy within the circumstances of the moment. So we are living kind of in a bear market. People have different concepts of bear markets, but anyways, we are living in a time that, like a few months ago, everything was way better than now. And there's a lot of uncertainty sometimes, or like people has to build their own macroeconomics overview. But the question is, from what they can, from this perspective, of what's happening in the world, what we feel about it, the uncertainty and all the stuff, what tools can we use, in StellaSwap to help us during those times?
Okay, macroeconomy is certainly a major factor that affects all markets, right? We are in denial if we say that crypto is a safe haven and it is not affected by the global macroeconomy. Unfortunately, it isn't the case, and we've seen it so many times, right? Now, the most important thing for anyone when they jump in the crypto market is obviously having the right knowledge and tools to make decisions. And the most important tool that they need as a person that is going to make financial decisions is risk management. Right? How do you manage your risk, right? So that's a core thing that you have to know before you go inside the crypto space. What is your risk appetite? You know, are you risk averse, or are you like a DeFi degen? You know, you just jump in with high risk and then just start yield farming and potentially facing a huge amount of impermanent loss, right? So you have to understand that, and you have to understand the various products within DeFi that you can use to achieve a level of portfolio that is where your risks are hedged. Now, since I've already established a foundation by saying that risk management is very important, in StellaSwap, what can you do? Right now, there are different products have varying levels of risk. Right, so if you look at one extreme, stable pool. You know, we have a base pool consisting of four largest stables, right? So if you stake in that base pool, base pool, you're going to earn like 15%, right? Which is far beyond any traditional financial instrument that you can find, right?
Yeah.
But relative to the crypto space, it is little. And why? Because there's close to zero impermanent loss. You will not get impermanent loss, right? So you are in crypto, stable pools are basically one of those places where there's very minimal risk, no financial risk, but there might be risk of, obviously, smart contract risk, technology risk, sort of that, right? Financially, it is close to zero risk, right? So that's stable. Now, if you look at the other end of the farms or yield farming, right, is where you find, like highly volatile or relatively new coins, packed on a farm, right? And those yields might be crazy, right? Like 1,000% APRs, but don't forget that with that, I mean, in finance, risk equal rewards, right? Higher risk equal higher rewards, right? And the risk in, for example, yield farming or yield farming is basically impermanent loss. When you put two volatile assets together, it can go up, but it can go down significantly, right? So impermanent loss would, if you face impermanent loss, the value of your portfolio will be reduced because of that. And so in StellaSwap, you have the leeway. What we like to focus on is basically stable farms where you can have that. There's blue chips as well, Bitcoin to Glamour Farms or Ethereum to Glamour Farms, Ethereum to USDC, or Glamour to USDC. So a Glamour to USDC is obviously our biggest, most traded pair. So yeah, though that is one farms, right? And with regards to, we also have a facility for you to have single asset staking, by from Stella, for example. That's highly popular. In fact, 30%, over 1/3 of our circulating supply is in Stella. So that is a very powerful statistics.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good answer. So basically, like you mentioned about impermanent loss, and there's a complete subject apart of impermanent loss. Long story short, a TLDR about impermanent loss is when you provide liquidity to a liquidity pool, and those two assets vary in price, and this variation causes you to lose some money, and it's impermanent because it's impermanent until you remove. When you remove, it's considered a permanent loss. So there's a percentage that you lose whenever you have a discrepancy in the price when you put in. Example, we can say Glimmer and USDC, right? USD or T, whatever you guys have. So we have one that is like 60 cents or $1, and USDT is always going to be $1. So if you vary a lot for $2, $3, $4, and the other keeps in $1, it's supposed to, this variation will cause you to generate some impermanent loss. So you're going to have some losses in there that you have to calculate. Now there is calculators online, and I will put one in the description below, so you can do your own analysis. But Aziz, you mentioned, like when I think about, you touched on a very good point. Probably the most important thing that you have to do when building your strategy is profiling yourself for risk, right? What is your risk appetite? And also do whatever you can for risk mitigation. And when you find a sweet spot about, I'm here in the risk profile, and I'm around here in my products that I'm putting, I'm investing on, you find a sweet spot where you're comfortable with, the scenarios. You can sleep at night, right? Now, when I think about risks, it's more than just the two assets, right? And we're gonna touch base. Maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but there is the risk of exploits and hacks, like we mentioned in the beginning. And again, I think we're supposed to talk more towards the end, but I just want to have your thoughts, because people watching this, they're thinking about risks, and they see what happened with UST, like going to zero, and Luna and all this stuff, some exploits in bridges and things like that. So maybe you can touch base, like what StellaSwap is doing to prevent the non-technical users to not have to think about the technical part.
Yeah, that's a very good question. In fact, when we created StellaSwap, one of the core design principles in whatever we're trying to do is basically abstracting DeFi complexity. Because as we all know, I mean, you cannot expect your parents to simply create a MetaMask or to sort of like interact with Curve, so that is something which is sort of unfortunate, right? Because the DeFi and crypto world is so far apart from the actual traditional world in terms of products which are simple. DeFi is really loaded with complexity. So what we try to do is basically reverse engineer typical user journeys in the DeFi space and try to, imagine a typical process would take 5 steps, right? In the traditional DeFi space. So what we should do is reduce it to 3 steps. So users are not exposed to certain degrees of complexities which they don't even need to be exposed to. So what we've done across our protocol is basically, if you've used our protocol, is make life easier. Whenever you want to do something, right? There are always like little guides, or little intuitive buttons that you can click to go on to the next step without having the experience or knowledge, that you are required to have to interact with DeFi. So number one, we make sure that our UI UX manifests in a user journey which makes sense, which is intuitive, and which is simple. The second thing is basically in relation to making things very, very simple, is basically launching products natively within our application. So in fact, a few minutes ago, we just launched an announcement on Twitter that we have relaunched our native bridge. So if you want to bridge over assets from Ethereum to Moonbeam or vice versa, traditionally you would go to Nomad's application, go to their website, do stuff, and come back. For us, doing that stuff outside, it's cumbersome. What we did is that you can do that natively on our application. Just stay here, just bridge. Once you've bridged, app, you can farm, you can stay, you can swap, whatever that you want. Right. So building applications natively within our application makes life so much easier for users. Then it becomes an intuitive user journey, and it creates protocol stickiness, ecosystem stickiness.
I see. And tell us more about this bridge, because it's like a fork of some of the other bridges, and because this is another discussion that I had. The problems with bridges normally is not in the smart contract, right? It's everything else. Is who has the multi-sig, who is controlling, that has some issues in there. So tell us, like, in your bridge, what makes you different, or what can the users can be assured, that's not going to happen what we normally see with other bridges.
Makes sense. So one key principle in DeFi that we are strongly with is composability. And one of an aspects of composability is basically like stacking each protocol to harness each of their benefits, so that you create a greater value adding sort of like mechanism. So with regards to bridges, we don't create the infrastructure. We merely link up, to specific bridges. So for example, our native bridge is right now connected on the back end to multi-chain as well as Nomad, right? So obviously Nomad is our, for Ethereum, you use Nomad, right? So on the front end, you see you're using the bridge is basically, oh, that's our native bridge. You're accessing through StellaSwap, but everything is communicated to the back end of, say, Nomad or multi-chain, right? So we are leveraging on their architecture, on their secure systems. So that is how we like to do things.
Yeah, and Nomad it's a very well-known bridge, right? People that are watching this, like, and we talk about bridges, this is a main point of concern because it's where you have a lot of money in it, in the bridges, right? Because you wrapped and create your token version in the other chain. So you hold on a lot of money in those points. So that's where hackers and exploiters like to attack first. They go where the money is. That's why bridges are so there's so many visibility from the hackers in this one. And Nomad is in the industry for a long time, with a very good reputation when it comes to, be sure, to be safe for users and secure in this sense. So that's very good to know. Maybe we can jump in a little bit more about StellaSwap, and you can tell me like an example of DeFi operation, because we talk about swaps, right? When I'm explaining DeFi to somebody that is very new to the industry, we talk about the basics, and one is swap and hodling, right? Those are two activities from the DeFi users, which is simply changing tokens for the other ones. But what happens in the DeFi and what is becoming DeFi is the ability to be able to provide liquidity without needing a centralized exchange behind the scenes, right? So that's what you guys do. But to do that, a decentralized AMA, what the pools are about, you have to provide liquidity to a certain pool. So we have glimmers in USDT. You want to exchange that, you can go and StellaSwap and just exchange. But in the back end, somebody else, could be me, is providing glimmers in USDT to that pool to make sure it's happening. Can you explain us a little bit about the rewards and the rewards from the fees that we receive? Because every AMM, they collect some rewards, right? And do the swap, there is some rewards generated. Where this rewards goes to afterwards, and then we're gonna talk about farming, but let's talk about the rewards first, the fees.
Got it. So right now the fees, when you look at the APRs, right? The APRs is made up of two main components. Number one is emissions, either from our own Stellar emissions or emissions. For example, if you look at Glamour, which is provided by Moonbeam, under the Moonbeam Harvest program, so they will be both of us will be the ones that incentivizing the pool with additional emissions on our own, right? And the second component, which is going to get larger in the long run, is basically trade APRs. Basically, every time when you swap, or anyone swaps, there's a fee of 0.25%. So what happens is that 80% of the trade fees goes back to liquidity providers. So if you provide LP into the Glamour USDC pool, 80% of the fees made from the trade of Glamour USDC goes back to you, right? The other 20% goes back to Stella holders, right? Stella holders who stick in Stella and get a share of the profit as well. That is obviously to maximize token holder value of Stella holders, who are a crucial part of the StellaSwap ecosystem.
That's very interesting. So this 80%, let me put my head around it, goes back when we see the APR, right? There's an APR when I provide liquidity to a liquidity pool and say, let's say 40%, whatever. This 40% is based on what? In the last few days, in the current block being produced, and how much is being generated? How do you calculate those APRs?
So for the APRs on the first component, which is the emission side, is very straightforward. Whatever that we have allocated daily, would be, the token price, and if the token price increases, and obviously APR increases, if the token price decreases, then vice versa, right? And also the size of the liquidity, you would earn more APRs if the pool is at 1 million TVL rather than 10 million TVL, right? Because the fixed rewards, of emissions are going to be shared with a larger pool of individuals, right? So that's the first component. Now, with regards to the trade fee, how is it calculated, right? It basically depends on the daily trading volume activity. If today, because of a certain news and boom, you have crazy trading volume for Glamour USDC, right? Therefore, the increase in value volume activity means, LP stakers would get 80% of the cut of the trading fees, right? And therefore the APLs would increase in relation to the increase in trading volume.
Okay. And how do you receive those APRs? In the same tokens, right? In Glimmers and USDC in this case, or just one of them?
So on the first component, if the APR is based on, for example, Stella and Glamour reward emissions, right? So that will be given, from each block. Every block that is created on Moonbeam, you're gonna get the rewards, right? So you can click anytime. But for the second component of the trade fee, it will be accumulated, and you will only get that. You will only be able to access that only when you leave the pool, when you leave the LP position.
Okay, I see. Pretty clear. Pretty clear. Now, the second part is doing yield farming. And I think that's where a lot of people get a little bit confused about. You can do the basic operations, swap and holding, right? You have a token that you like and you just hold in your wallet, and that's pretty much it. You can do provide liquidity. So liquidity pool, I consider that, in my understanding of DeFi, it's kind of a second layer, like you're going a little bit deeper, in the DeFi operations. And a third layer would be do the yield farming. And you can maybe explain to us or to everybody what yield farming is, and how StellaSwap is doing that, like the rewards and so on.
Got it. So yield farming is a pretty broad category of an action, right? Basically, because yield farming is basically generating yields from whatever DeFi applications, may be providing liquidity on the DEX like us, or on a lending and borrowing, single asset lending and borrowing facility like Moonwell, or further, next level yield farming is, when you look at our newly created My facility, where you can collateralize, basically borrow my stablecoin by collateralizing or locking your Glamour or Stella, right? And therefore it's a kind of leverage, and then stake that mine into a stable farm, and then do more yields on top of your already generating collaterals. So there's various degrees of yield farming, as well as products within those categories. Now, on StellaSwap, right? If you talk about the first and most common way of yield farming is liquidity provisioning, right? Now, to understand liquidity provisioning, you have to understand that on the traditional context of how a NASDAQ or works is basically, there would be market makers, right? Institutions that provide the liquidity, and because they provide liquidity, they would have a cut, somewhere, from the exchange operator itself or from trades itself, right? So it's in the DeFi space, the only thing different is that the entire process is decentralized, right? So it makes sense if you provide liquidity, which is basically the lifeblood of an exchange, you would be, as in, rewarded, because you are incentivized. We want to incentivize this process of liquidity provisioning, and therefore you would generate yields from that. Now, the most important part of DeFi, which is why it's so awesome, is composability. Basically, using various components on DeFi, like imagine DeFi as Lego blocks. You stack one protocol on top of another to generate a value, to harness a various value accrual mechanisms that makes that really enhances the user experience of DeFi. So then you have various products, like asset collateralization, like what we've launched with Chidao, with my stablecoin facility. You can actually borrow stablecoins on the back of your collaterals, and there's Stella staking, where if you have Stella, and you stake into to get X Stella tokens, what it means is that you would continually get 20% of all trading fees generated on the platform. That is for you, for users to reward them for their loyalty to StellaSwap. So, and also, for lending and borrowing, you go to Moonwell, you stake there, and then you get, if you're a lender, you get interest rates, right? Because of money markets. So those are various levels of yield farming that is most common.
That's cool. So it's even a different concept of what I had. What I had, like I said, it was like yield farming was the next level when you have your LP tokens, which is a liquidity pool. When you provide liquidity to liquidity pool, you receive a token that represents your share in the pool, and that's called LP tokens. When you put those LP tokens to stake or kind of a put away, in this way, you guarantee that this pool will have health within time, so people don't unstake very fast, and remove the liquidity in a case of an emergency. You receive more rewards. In my opinion, this was yield farming. But what I'm understanding from you is that everything is yield farming, right? Everything that receives yield from some operations in DeFi, it's considered yield farming, right?
Yeah, there's no hard and fast rule about that. Even we're divided, the space is divided into the definition of yield farming. But yeah, I think it could, in my mind, as in basically any evidence within the DeFi sector where you can generate yields. That is how, it all depends on the degrees of complexities or the various layers of protocol. Communication is where you really define the different asset classes within yield farming.
Okay. So one of the services would be getting your LP tokens. I imagine like a user experience from the beginning, right? I have Glimmers and I have USDC in my wallet. So the first thing that I want to do to optimize the yields that I get on those, instead of just holding it, I will provide liquidity to a liquidity pool. Of course, you're gonna do your own research, make sure you're okay with the risks of impermanent loss and so on. But when you do, you receive some rewards. But then you can get your LP token and send to, you can stake them, right? And in exchange, you receive not only what you would receive in the liquidity pool rewards, but you receive more than that, because that's what Stella wants to incentivize. And then now you start to receive the governance tokens, which is Stella, right? And with those Stellas, which is in your wallet, is dropping in your wallet, you can just claim them. You can stake the Stellas as well, right? And whoever has staked Stellas is the one that receives the rewards from the liquidity pool, the 20% that you mentioned, right?
Yes, correct. Exactly. So that is another layer.
Yeah, maybe I overcomplicate. Maybe I hit. Some people will say like what you just said. Just rewind a little bit, because it's basically what normally what I do. Like you do the swaps that you want. You have the tokens that I like. I'm never will provide liquidity pool to tokens that I don't like. It doesn't make sense. And then I provide liquidity. I have those rewards. I stake those LP tokens. I get more rewards out of it. And within those rewards, I start to stake those rewards to get more rewards. So it's a compounding of rewards that you receive, right?
Exactly. And you see, it is quite a lengthy process. With that lengthy process, there is complexity. So as we focus on simplicity, one of the products that we launched early on was ZAP. So ZAP is essentially one-click staking. So like what you said, right? It's interesting. You said that if you had Glamour and USDC in your wallet, out of the blue, and then you will stake it. I can, like 95% of the time, many people will just have one coin, or a couple of coins which aren't even sort of like related, right? And then what they have to do is if they want to, okay, so I have USDC and I want to stake into the yield farm into the Glamour USDC pool. I have to do a 50-50% split. So I have to buy Glamour with 50% and then add token on the pool page and then stake it on the farm. What we've done is basically, you have USDC, no problem. Put it into the ZAP page and bam, you're going to get an LP token which has already been divided into two in an equal ratio, and which has already generated an LP token, basically a share of the entire liquidity pool. So that is basically what we call one-click staking to really simplify the user experience.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You see, like whoever is watching this video, I explained the whole process, which normally in the DeFi space, that's what we have to go through. And that's why there's some complexity, and some people take advantage of it because it's complex, and not a lot of people is aware of it. So we create like an offer demand different. And what Stella is doing is actually making our life easier. Like with one button, you can reduce this process significantly, and have a much better user experience, because that's for sure. I mean, I remember the times, even though I feel comfortable in doing those operations, I remember a lot of times that I decided for a pool, and by the end of the day was not that pool that I want to do. So I had to redo all the process again, and this was very, very cumbersome. So that's really good. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about one of the products that I saw on your website, which is lending and borrowing, and when we click over there, there is a link to Moonwell direct. Is that it?
Correct. Yes, exactly. Moonwell. They just launched.
So the partnership is just you advertising Moonwell, or there is something more happening between Stella and Moonwell?
No, we've had a working relationship with them for quite a bit of time, and we love working with them. In fact, we understand the roles, our functions within the ecosystem, right? For us, we're a DEX, we provide trade routing and liquidity provisioning across the space, which is a critical component of any ecosystem. For Moonwell, their function is different. Their function is facilitating money markets, or in a simple words, money lending and borrowing. Now, money markets is a central part of any system, even in the real world, as in any traditional financial system. Money markets is at the core of the systems, right? And it's no different with DeFi, right? Because lending and borrowing is basically one of the things that you have to have in finance, right? And in a decentralized way, like Moonwell Optimists, they've a very, very powerful team, smart people. We've been working with them together to prepare for the launch, because the partnership, basically how we work together is that for them to launch, right, there needs to be deep liquidity on Moonbeam, right? And that means that we have to have tremendous liquidity across strategic pairs that Moonwell is focused on, Glamour, or Ethereum, or USDC, or stablecoin liquidity, right? So what happens is that whenever there are liquidations on Moonwell, it will be routed to a DEX, which is us, right? So we have to ensure that there is sufficient liquidity to buffer for that liquidation. So we've been working with them for a couple of weeks, even before they launch, to help out each other, in even testing, and to sort of like ensure that there are very little frictions, to ensure everything is perfect for them to launch, for us as well on our products and system, and for the overall community, for the overall ecosystem.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So the lending and borrowing requires, to have the AMAs, right? To do the swaps in between the tokens that they want,
exactly.
The user wants. I see.
Exactly.
I see. Yeah, this is interesting. So, okay, so Moonwell is partnering with Stella, right? To have those pools available for them.
Yeah, for liquidations, lending and borrowing is very important for liquidations to occur.
Liquidations. Okay. Yeah. I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Do they require Oracle, or they get your information from the pools, or both for the liquidation?
Both. I mean, obviously they've worked. I mean, Chainlink is live, right? So we can do that. Now, obviously, we have a direct path to our backend as well. When liquidations happens, right? Usually bots are used to sort of like arbitrage, or to facilitate liquidations.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe going back a little bit, and you mentioned about Stella, Stella. Can you talk a little bit about the tokenomics behind? Because I know there is something that is very good about the buyback Stella that you guys have. It's a small percentage. Can you explain a little bit more, about those governance tokens and what you can do with it, and also like voting and all the stuff, but also like the rewards that you get out of it?
Got it. So right now, emissions, right? Daily emissions is divided into 70% user rewards, which means 70% of emissions is all going to incentivize individuals across the ecosystem, right? Through our native tokens. So in order for us to bootstrap liquidity, right? Basically, bootstrap liquidity means to attract liquidity, right? We need to offer incentives, right? And emissions is how we do it. Now, a core part of emissions, right? Since emissions means an inflationary supply of tokens, right? And obviously, inflation means more of something, and therefore the sell pressure is huge. So what we need to be very smart and really, really calibrate is, on the other hand, on the buy side, right? How do we increase buying pressure, right? And the main way to increase buying pressure is to have lots of utility of your coin, right? If there is no use of your coin, then people will keep on selling. But we need to increase utility of the coin. So what we've done is basically started out with XStella. You stake Stella, which now accounts for almost 1/3 of the entire circulating supply. You stake Stella, and guess what? You would earn 20% of every single trade happening, and you'll be credited with that reward. So that's an incentive for you to hold Stella, because you are participating in the revenue of the ecosystem. Now, going a step further, right, in terms of composability, which is very powerful in DeFi, how can XStella, which is basically your revenue generating token, right? How can XStella be used beyond StellaSwap ecosystem, right? So we've partnered with Chidao, right, where they're a stablecoin protocol, over collateralized stablecoin protocol, right? Not algorithmic. So we allow yeah, exactly. That's a very important distinction. So for you to mint my stablecoin on Moonbeam, we're the first, right? You have to, as in you can collateralize XStella, right? And usage means that you can use XStella as a collateral and to mint mine, and then use that mine to yield farm for all you want, right? So, and then increasing more. In fact, when our StableAMM launch, right, the fees, 20% of the fees from the StableAMM goes to XStella holders as well. So now XStella holders are earning fees from StandardAMM, fees from StableAMM, and also you can stay in the tri-pool where you will earn Glamour, USDC, and Stella, right? So we are creating these use cases and utility, which is going to increase down the line, because we are going to launch with an IDO system. We have a lot of projects on the pipeline for IDOs, right? And for you to participate in the IDO, you must have a degree of XStella. So all these products that we're going to launch in the future, there would be utility for Stella token, with the main purpose of maximizing token holder value.
That's really cool. It's really cool that you have all those utilities, because this is one of the concerns, when people talk about those taxes. It's about the governance token and not having a lot of utilities, but that's definitely not Stella case, right? You guys are not only, you have that, but you also aiming to add more layers of utility to the token, right?
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah. And this what is this buyback, the 0.005% buyback Stella to the XStellas? Is that
so? Basically, buybacks is basically 20% of all trades, is earned by Stella holders, right? So what this means is that whatever pair that, and whatever fees is collected or denominated in all those pairs, what we do is that we use those revenue to buy back Stella from the open market, right? So the revenue from the trade fees is going to be used to buy Stella. So there will be a demand floor, because every day there are buybacks, right? And the more volume there is, the higher the buyback. So the more buying of Stella in the open market to give to XStella holders. So that is something that's we've sort of like launched as in executed on that.
Okay, that's cool. And that is something that won't change, right? This is in your core.
Exactly. That's a very important, because that ensures price floor. Every day, the protocol will buy back Stella from the open market, right? There's going to be inflation, sell side, and then it's balanced by a buy side, which is basically the protocol buying every day from trade fees.
Okay. Can you mention, I think it's a couple of last questions before we jump to the final part. Can you talk about the analytics that you guys have on your website, and also the Launchpad and NFT marketplace, because I saw that, and you just mentioned about the IDOs.
Got it. So analytics is basically a page where you can actually see you can assess or analyze all the data with regards to our exchange, or even all the pairs or all the farms within our exchange. So you can see the total volume that we've done for this pair, the number of transactions, the number of fees generated. So you can basically do your own sort of like look to see what is the most popular pair, which trading pair makes the most fees. You can analyze, or even if you're a developer, you can use those analytics to build on top of it, or if you're building an aggregator or stuff like that, right? So which is dependent on price action. So we've used the graph, for this, and it's a pretty cool stuff. Analytics is a very important part of a tool for anyone to use, right? It's sort of like,
it's a good decision making tool, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a great decision making tool for you to look at numbers and data. I mean, you need those to make decisions anyway, right?
Yeah.
And basically, the two things that you talk about are NFTs and Launchpad. So a Launchpad is what we call IDO. So initial as in initial offering, right? So for any IDO, that has been in the roadmap since start, and right now we're on the one of the main blockers of launching IDO was finding a good quality project, because we don't want to just have any project launch an IDO, and if it fails, there's a credibility risk, and the fact that we should have set a high bar for projects to qualify, so that it is a net positive thing for the ecosystem. So we have a lot of good projects right now in the pipeline, and we're excited and we're ready to sort of like launch the IDO, which is coming soon, and which is going to be tagged to our token utility. So watch out for that. And for NFTs, so that is something that we've really been excited with, and we would. What's in the pipeline is basically a gamification of our protocol, which is we've spoken to a lot of advisors, which are basically OGs in the DeFi space, right? And one of those things that we've picked up is basically gamification is really important. And obviously at the core of gamification, NFTs are basically one of those mediums that we would seek to use to achieve that.
Okay. That's pretty cool. That's very exciting. So roadmap wise, this is what we can expect, right? We're going to have more products coming in, more utilities for Stella token. And maybe we can jump in and change the question a little bit. Like, how do you see Stella in 5 years? How do you see DeFi in Stella in 5 years?
In DeFi, a traditional year is like, as in a month in DeFi is like a year in traditional time, right? So it's crazy, things move so fast, as in there's so much innovation. In 5 years, right? What we expect is to be one of those leading protocols in Polkadot and even beyond, right? Because what we're trying to do now is basically spearhead thought leadership in terms of DeFi protocols, DeFi UI UX, engineering, and that is what we want to focus on. It's to continually solve problems within the DeFi space, continually to improve and create more products that add value, and really to basically benefit the entire ecosystem and really simplify the user journey. So where we feel we'll be in 5 years' time, that's a challenge to sort of like visualize, but we will we will continue to be at the tip of innovation.
That's cool. And I like the answer. It's definitely, maybe 5 years was a stretch, right? Like we didn't have DeFi 5 years ago, or very limited DeFi. 5 years ago. So we are very early stages, and who knows what the futures hold, right?
Exactly.
Aziz, thank you so much. Do you have any final thoughts? Do you like to share anything with the community? Say hello.
No, I think, as I said, community is very important. What I'm really proud of is our community, which continually gives us feedback and in a very transparent and honest manner, which we really really appreciate. Because that's the core of building things in a decentralized way for the community, right? We are merely slaves to the community because we are building for the community. And in fact, as in a growing number of those in our team is from the community, right? So they share that passion, that fire in terms of, doing things right, doing things to add value, to simplify stuff. So that is a culture that we feel really, really proud to have and to continue to harness. And therefore, I would seek anyone, if you're using our platform, if you see something wrong, if you feel something can be improved on, or if you feel you can do a better job at something, right? Please feel free to reach out. Who knows you'll be part of the team. So we really appreciate that.
It's very good to have this responsiveness, to feedback and improvements, because that's what DeFi is, right? It's a mutant, every day changing a little bit. There's always new stuff coming in. So we have to be open-minded that, changes will be necessary with time, everything time. So I'm very excited. It was a very good interview as this, because we talked about not only Stella, but the values behind Stella, right? The security, the user experience, how to make life easier to the user by doing the zaps and all the security, adding utility to the tokens, making sure the token is wealth, is healthy, right? In this sense. So I would like to thank you so much for your time today. We had an amazing chat. Hopefully, who knows, we get together again in one of those conferences, right? Maybe a few months from now.
Yes, definitely. Yes,
Right.
yes. Looking forward to it.
Was a pleasure, Aziz. Talk to you next time.
Pleasure is mine, Thiago. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.